the third year and counting, Richard Skipper has been celebrating the artists you love.
And what are some of the things that you've really run out of time? And we've got to talk about your latest. I want to go back a little bit, first of all, and celebrate a true legend.
Richard Skipper is all about celebrating life, art, and his guest body of work.
And did you pursue performing opportunities while you were in high school?
Please join us while he showcases these diverse and talented individuals. Here's Richard Skipper.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to a very special edition of Richard Skipper Celebrates. As I'm doing this show, I'm reminded of an old commercial that ran in the 1970s. Some of you may remember. Is it live or is it Memorex? Well, today we're live to tape because I have a very special guest on the show, and that is Grover Dell. And he has a new book out called A Boy Like That. Now, when I first heard that this book was coming out, I kept chomping at the bit to get this interview. And I knew that when this book did eventually come out, so by the time that you are all seeing this, this is a pre-taped interview. I knew that he would be inundated with interviews. So I jumped the gun, so to speak, and I got this interview before anyone else. So this interview is done long before anyone else's. I'm not hearing any of the questions that anyone else is going to be asking him. This is my own unique take on the life, the career, and the body of worth of Grover Dell. I am thrilled that you were here today, Grover, and congratulations, first of all, on getting this book. I know for several years I've been following you on Facebook, and thank God that you have been putting your stories and your anecdotes, if you will, all on paper for your friends, your family, your followers to get these stories. But you finally made the decision to put it into a book form. And by the time that everyone is seeing this interview, they can now purchase your book. So I want to ask you, first of all, what made you decide to finally write the book?
You know, because I have a family, and I have a son, and now I have a grandson, and for my grandson, I want it for him. I want him to have a flavor of where his dad came from, and I am such a lucky person. I'm sitting here in the Jenga building on the 23rd floor. I'm overlooking the Freedom Tower, and it's amazing. I wake up to it every day, and I came from a shack on a dirt road in the hills of Pennsylvania that was half the size of this apartment. So how in the heck did I get here?
I know how you got there because it's all in your book. And I want to say something. First of all, you and I have something in common, and that was that we both had doting grandmothers. I mean, your grandmother, oh my God, did your grandmother, I mean, she was the wind beneath your wings, and she pushed you along. So let's start with your grandmother. And if you can tell everyone about your grandmother, then of course you go into great detail in your book about her. But she really, in the midst of chaos at home with a mom, a stepfather, all these things that were going on in your household, but your grandmother kept her feet on the ground to keep you dancing in your dancing shoes. And we'll get there in a few moments.
She was a German immigrant who came from Germany to a mill town in the hills of Pennsylvania. And the neighborhood, we were the only German immigrants that were around. So she had a lot to cope with, but boy, she had some skills that I'm so grateful for. You know, she handled stuff when my mom, when my mom was abandoned by my father in Harrisburg, where I was born, and suddenly my mother was stuck with an 8-week-old baby that she really didn't know how to take care of, and bills to pay that she couldn't take care of. And my grandmother put my grandfather in the back, behind the wheel of a Model T Ford, and directed him to Harrisburg and said, "Bring them home." So I got to go. We got to go to McKeesport, and thank God that happened. And I got in that house with 8 German immigrants, a dog, and 15 chickens running around the yard, and a grape arbor, and it was a miraculous beginning. It was.
Well, Grover, you and the detail in your book, which is an incredible book, by the way, but the detail that you bring long before any child would be able to know the details of the decisions that your mom was making, thinking as you tell in your book about your father abandoning her. Here is a woman thinking that she may never have any other prospects because she's got a small child, trying to raise a child, wondering if any man would want her, and trying to. Then there's dating. I love the one story that you tell of her bringing a guy home and you running in and dancing naked at 5 years old around. And your mom, something that any 5-year-old would possibly do, but your mom thinking, oh my God, nobody would marry a woman with the kind of chaos. It was like a scene out of not It's a Wonderful Life, but I'm thinking someone's going to help me out with this. It'll come to me in a moment. But the chaos that was surrounding everything that you just described, that your mom was thinking, and at one point you even mentioned that the idea of you going into an orphanage was not off the realm for your mom.
Right. Well, my grandmother talked her out of it. It's like there we were, and my mother thought her only option.
You can't take it with you. That was what I was thinking of. There it is. Sorry about that.
That's okay. And my grandmother was there were like 20 plates on the table. My mother said, you can't put 20 meals on a table every day. And my grandmother says, yes, I can. You have seen me do it all my life, and I'm not going to stop. And if that kid doesn't need to go into an orphanage, because the love he's going to get, he's only going to get it here. And within, the tears filled up in my mother's eyes, and she went and stared out the window. And within minutes, my mother agreed that grandma was right.
Well, those who watch my shows know that I always go back to the 5-year-old self, because the 5-year-old self, is, excuse me, is the purest self, where it all begins. And interestingly enough, on the very first page of your book, you start with the 5-year-old self. And I thought, well, he's making it very easy for me. So here's this photograph of you around your age. And I love this photograph.
Well, I think I'm 8 there.
Well, for those who have not read the book, if you can tell us about this little boy and about the life and the journey that he's about to embark upon.
Yeah, that kid. First of all, look at the knickers. Look at, and a beanie on his head, and the suspenders on his pants, and my hands clasped in his side. I would try anything get somewhere. And at this time, um, right in front of me was the grape arbor, and my grandmother would carry me there, and we would stand in the grape arbor, and she would pick the grapes and put them in my mouth, and my mother married another mill worker because she felt she had no choice, and he said, "You can't. Boys don't dance. Boys play football and chase girls and drink beer and
play with guns.
It what?
And play with guns. They do all those things.
Right, exactly. And that wasn't the kind of life I wanted. So a couple of years after that picture, I was on my way. My grandmother and grandpa were in that Model T Ford waiting outside the shack, heating up the engine. They were taking me down to Pittsburgh to get on a Greyhound bus to go to New York City. And I was on my way, and my sister, who then was 12, was right behind me, demanding a goodbye hug and insisting that her father really cared about me. And I said, that's not the kind of life that I want, that I can have for myself. I've got to go get it. And, and my mom and dad weren't even in the house. They were over on Versailles Avenue in some saloon, slugging down mugs of Iron City beer. And so, I said, tell them when they get home that I'll be in touch, but I'm going to do it my way.
Well, and God bless you. But I want to back up for a moment. I want to talk about the lady across the street. Because one day, Mrs. Kunkel, was it Mrs. Kunkel that?
Mrs. Kunkel, yeah.
Mrs. Kunkel offered you $5. Not a dollar.
No, she offered me a dollar.
A dollar.
Because my dad wouldn't give me an allowance. So I worked it all out, but I would sell cups of lemonade for 2 cents to neighbors. So I had it all set up out on the bank out on the dirt road. And one day I saw Mrs. Kunkel running across the street, waving a dollar bill in the air. So I started pouring the lemonade. She says, no lemonade. I don't want lemonade. He says, I'll pay you $1 if you take my son, Jimmy, down to Lillian Jasper's dance studio. And I'll pay for your tap class as well. So a free anything was heaven to me. So I didn't know about tap dancing. So I jumped on it. And within minutes, Jimmy was there with his tap shoes over his shoulder. I had my dollar. And all of a sudden, the car pulls up. And it's my dad and his brother coming from the mill. And they said, what's going on? And I said, well, I got $1. And Mrs. Kunkel says, Grover's taking my son Jimmy down to Lillian Jasper's for a tap class, and he's going to get a free one as well. And Sonny Cox says, my son doesn't take tap dancing lessons. I said, Dad, I'll chase girls and play football tomorrow. Today, I'm going down for a free tap class. So I was out of there, and I was down. I got on the bus with Jimmy, and we went to Lillian Jasper. And Lillian Jasper was this generous, wonderful, warm, large woman who convinced me immediately that dance was written all over me. And, so she says, and it's just going to get better. All you need is to put some metal on those shoes. So metal. Oh, okay. So when I went home, Grandma is making soup for dinner, and she's opening progressive cans of soup. So I see the tin can lids that she's cutting off, and I gather up 4 of them and take them out of the car. What are you what are you going to do with those? I says, I'm going to make music with them. So all of a sudden on my clodhoppers, I was down in the basement nailing the tin can lids to the soles of my clodhoppers. And I had to test it out. So there was a furnace. You know, when we were kids, they had big furnaces. And we used to take showers next to the furnace because it was a warm place. So we had a little wooden platform right next to the furnace with a spigot over there, and that's where we would shower. So I thought, okay, I'll test my clodhoppers out on the wooden platform. So I get on there and start jumping around, and they're scratching up the platform. I said, I can't do this to Lily and Jasper's dance studio. So Grandma comes up with a roll of masking tape. And so we unpeel it and we tape the tin can lids to my shoes. So I go back. That's how I went back to this is my second tap class. And Mrs. Jasper, she loved the idea of it. But, you know, she says, we got to find a way to get you some real super Selva tap shoes. And guess who did that? Grandma Ammon.
Yes.
She showed me how money earns money, how money makes money. You take your pennies you saved, you roll them in the roll of 50s, and you take them down to the bank, you deposit them in a savings account, and after a year, you get 5% interest. So a $10 in your savings account earns you 50 cents interest every year. So it was amazing to me that money earns money. That's how.
And you got your own tap shoes.
And I got my own tap shoes, and it happened at the bank, and I'm giving the attendant my rolls of pennies to deposit in my bank account. And Grandma's standing there, and she says, I have a surprise for you. She says, I know what you wanted. You sacrificed buying yourself a tap.
No, keep going.
Okay. So I bought you a present. You don't need to use your savings to buy the taps. She takes out a cellophane envelope with 4 Super Selva taps in it. And that's what gave me a way to put music on my feet.
But after you got the shoes, your stepfather, also tried to get rid of them.
Oh, at least once.
Yes.
Yes.
But
yes,
your grandmother took care of that too.
Yes, she did.
Yes.
Do you want to know how?
Well,
right. I know it's Saturday. It's time for the tap class. So I go down in the basement. And I had this sleeping platform that was over the cellar steps. And below the sleeping platform was the toilet and a sink. So I stored my tap shoes down there because there was a cabinet. And I went down and they weren't there. So I thought, oh, I know where they are. I ran out the back in the garbage can. There were no tap shoes. And I heard the garbage truck around the corner. And I run to the garbage truck and I'm pulling up bags of kitchen produce and stuff. And I'm looking for it. And I hear Grandma calling out the kitchen window, Grover, I have your shoes. So I ran back to the kitchen. There she was. She had my clodhoppers, and she had the Super Selva taps attached to it. So I had the shoe.
Wow. I'm reminded of that scene in the 1937 version of A Star is Born, when Janet Gaynor's grandmother sends her on the road to Hollywood. And it was your grandmother that got you on the road to coming to New York and everything. And again, these stories are all in the book. We want people to buy the book. But if you can give a Reader's Digest version of how your grandparents got you to New York to pursue a career as a dancer.
Well, grandma made everything happen. She was very smart about real estate. She'd buy a house and she'd rent it for $28 a month. And it was amazing. So that happened getting to New York too. So we get down to the Greyhound station, and she's on the bus with me, and there's only two other passengers, and they're in the seat behind me, and they have a checkerboard and they're playing checkers. And Grandma's with me in the aisle, and I see the look in her eye. I see that we're going to say goodbye. And so we hug, and she hands me an envelope, a manila folder. And she says, I shake it, and there's a little rattling sound. And she says, there's just a few pictures in there that you should have. And so she leaves, and she says, don't open it until you get out on the road. So she goes out onto the platform, and the bus driver revs up. It's about ready to go. And all of a sudden, outside, this Plymouth pulls up, and it's Lillian Jasper with 4 of the girls from the dancing school. And they do a celebratory dance for me right in front of the bus. And the bus driver is saying, get those people out of here. I'm going to run them over. And so I'm watching that dance, and Grandma's doing it with them. And we start to pull away, and it's gone. It's drifted by, and it starts to rain. Raindrops are dripping down the window, and we're getting closer to the Pennsylvania Turnpike. And I suddenly remember the files, the envelope, and I take out of the cord, and out of it there's 6 pictures of my real father that I had never seen before. And he's one when he's at 3, and he's actually wearing a kilt, a Scottish kilt. And there's one of my grandfather, who was the photographer, and he's wearing this hat with a feather in it, and a sword, and what are they, shields. And I'm looking at these pictures of my father, and he's got this sweet look on his eyes. And I thought, wait a minute, a guy with eyes like that can't desert a wife and a child. Mm-hmm. And so I start to have these feelings about, and there's another picture of my father with me sitting on his lap, and we're both smiling. So, my mother wanted me to hate my father. And how do you hate a father who you don't know, and how you wish that your father was nearby and had some way of telling you that there was a reason why you were born. There's a wonderful reason why you were born. So I held on to that feeling, and I'm glad I did.
I am too. It's true of life in general. I mean, there are people that we've been led to believe certain things about that we've never even met, based on things that people have told us about those people, especially in the business that you and I are both in. All the time we hear stories about people that we've encountered, legendary stories about certain people, and people say, well, that person's difficult, that person's this. And you and I both know otherwise because we've worked with those people. But I want to talk about your first night in New York. I mean, here you are about to embark upon your dream. And of course, you made your dreams come true. But what are your recollections of that first night in New York with that whole red carpet in front of you? Of
So red carpet?
A red carpet of possibilities in front of you.
Well, it started. I rented a room for $3 a night at the Y, just so I had a place, and I needed to explore from there, and that was like on 34th Street or something. So Times Square, the theater district, was only 12, 15 blocks away. So the next morning I went up there and there was Actors Equity. And I happened to be a member of Actors Equity because I had done a summer of musicals at the Pittsburgh Civic Light Opera. So lucky me. So I got to go to Actors Equity and check out their audition board every day. And the first audition that I saw was for Pajama Game. And that was going to be choreographed by a newcomer from California that no one had ever heard of before, called Bob Fosse. And he had done this amazing dance. And what was it? Kiss Me Kate. And so I ran to that audition, and the steps were thrown at us, and it was unbelievable because there were hundreds of people waiting for this shot. And also Jerome Robbins was there. He was the supervisor. It was Bob Fosse's first show, and they wanted the safety of having a classic director choreographer on board. So Robbins was there, and I remember Fosse lining us up and then coming to us each one by one and asking questions. And I thought, oh my God, what I'm hearing, all these kids are getting training from New York City Ballet Theater. No one's ever heard of Lillian Jasper Dance Studio before. So I stumbled my way through it. And he said, look, you're a little too young to play a factory worker, but I kind of like your energy. So just stick around a while. So did I stick around? Oh yeah, all day long. And they came to the time when they were going to pick, there were 10 finalists and they were going to pick 8. And I wasn't one of them. So, but I made it that far. But I ran to my day job from there. My day job was at Needings at the corner of Times Square. And I sold hot dogs and orange juice and French fries. I was a counterman. And Stanley was the manager. And I told Stanley what happened. And Stanley, I was a counterman for like 4 or 5 months. And finally, something happened, and I auditioned for June Taylor for the Jackie Gleason shows. And I booked 4 Jackie Gleason shows. And I ran back, and I told Stanley, and he said, oh my God, a counterman is going to, and he said, you gotta pack up and get out of here. I said, no, it's only a 6 weeks booking. I'll be back. I'll do the show for. He says, wait a minute. He said, I said, look, I'm a chorus boy. I'll do the show for 6 weeks and then I'm gonna be back. He says, well, if you think you're a chorus boy, that's what you're going to be. So until you make the decision that you're going to go somewhere, you're going to be stuck here at the counter.
Wow. Wow.
You know,
There's a book that I quote a lot. Marlo Thomas has a book called The Right Words at the Right Time. And that is what an amazing thing for him to say to you at that moment.
wonderful. Wasn't it amazing? You know, and
I mean, did you go home that night? And I mean, I can imagine that just like a bell clanging in your head.
yeah, I couldn't believe that he was right, you know, and you know, and I had a secret thing that I did. I also, before I left Nedick's, I would always had my dance bag, and I was on the 4 to 1 shift. I would pack it with 3 raw hamburgers.
Mm.
Or no, I didn't. I put the raw hamburgers on my chest. I opened up my shirt, and because he had to inspect my dance bag every time I took it out. So that night I went home with those raw hamburgers on my chest, and I went on the bus, went to the back of the bus, and I sat down, and I look down the aisle, and there are people looking over at the aisle. They're looking at 3 raw hamburgers in the aisle, and I realized I was walking too fast, and the hamburgers fell off my chest. So, you know, that's what life was like. You know, it was kind of magical in a way. You know,
So my guess is that you did not go back there
back to
Nedick's.
I'm sorry, to what?
To the hot dog stand. You did not go back to work there after Jackie Gleason.
No, actually, I didn't, because I got another job. But I would go back to visit because I needed to talk to Stanley. Stanley was my best friend in a way. He was like a father figure for me,
Well, Grover, you know, I have this thought about this business. No matter how good you are, you can be the best in the business, and you are truly one of the best. No matter how good you are, it's the people that you meet along the way. And as you start building your career, your reputation starts to grow, and people begin to know who you are and what you're all about. When do the calls start coming in when people start saying, we want you for this project?
Oh, that didn't happen for a long time. It was mostly visits to the Actors Equity, the casting board, buying backstage, checking out the auditions. You know, because when I started, I thought, I knew I was a good dancer, and I thought a good choreographer will recognize my ability no matter where I stand. But I didn't realize, but you had to get in the front. You had to find a way at an audition to get yourself in a visible place. You know, this, by the way, is by Kazuma Yoshimeki. And I think this is an amazing piece of art.
Oh, it is. It's incredible.
Anyway, yeah, I got all that.
How did the move happen from doing stage work to film work? Because you also did so much work in Hollywood. And of course, so many of us are so familiar as one of the brothers in The Unsinkable Molly Brown. And funny story, when I was 17 years old, I found out that my local theater company was holding auditions for The Unsinkable Molly Brown. And I thought the only role that I could possibly do in this is probably one of the brothers. So I auditioned for one of the brothers, which I didn't get, but I ended up playing Roberts the butler, in that production of The Unsinkable Molly Brown. But you did play one of the brothers in the movie. So how did that begin to happen? And were you doing a lot of film work prior to that, or did that really begin to?
Well, West Side Story was like a university. Going to the university, the best course in musical theater ever. Robbins was tough as nails and hard on everybody, but it didn't matter. Just accept it, and deal with it. And, he scared me to death, but it didn't matter because there was the time when we were out of town in Washington with West Side, when Larry Kurt, who I was lovers with and we'd lived together, ran into rehearsal holding up the ad for West Side Story. And he runs over to me and says, "Look, your name is on the poster," and I couldn't believe it. But I found out later, Jerry Robbins got my name on that poster for me, and that's pretty amazing. And so I didn't have an agent until I was in West Side Story, so the getting my roots and getting my stability going took a long time. Jerry Robbins. Well, what was your original question?
No, about getting the role of one of the brothers in The Unsinkable Molly Brown and how those roles were beginning to happen for you.
So I had an agent by that time, and I was up in Cape Cod, and I was. That was not Unsinkable Molly Brown. When did the Molly Brown happen? That was Peter Gennaro. Peter Gennaro, who was with West Side Story, and that was my first connection with Peter too. Peter used to see me backstage, and I was totally fascinated with Chita Rivera. Her feet were electrifying. I used to sit in the wings before going on for the cool dance, and I used to watch her feet, the way she articulated her feet, and it was so exciting to watch. Anyway, Peter Gennaro cast me without an audition for Molly Brown, and I remember my agent calling me, and so I grabbed it. What an amazing opportunity, and to be in a film with Debbie Reynolds, and the first number we did, and I remember shoving her face in the mud with my foot, holding her face down in the mud, and she didn't care. I mean, she was just tough as nails. And then the other dance, the one with the red socks, and how I got away with wearing the red. That's what I remember, how I got away with wearing the red socks in that dance. And Debbie Reynolds, when I came onto the set, I had them on, and she came over to me and says, "Where did you get those red socks?" And I said, "I brought them from home. I'm sorry." I said, "Wardrobe wanted me to do the dance in bare feet, and I knew if I was in bare feet, my feet would be sticky in these boots, and I wouldn't dance as well. So I wanted to dance my best for you, Dad." So I said, "I brought my socks," and they had to be red, right? I said, "Well, I'll switch them out for black ones if you want." And she let me get away with it, with those red socks. So that was very special. Very special.
It's amazing, just amazing. And there, if you can tell the story about the one shot that you did with the the shot with the apple.
The apple?
Well, when in the opening scene when you had to shoot her.
Yeah, when I had to hit her in the chest.
Yes.
No, it was with a tomato.
With the tomato. Sorry about that.
Rotten tomato.
Like a rotten tomato. Yes.
Yeah, and they came over to me and they said, "You think you could handle that? And you think you could do it in one shot, one take?" I said, "One take?" He said, "Yeah, because we only have 24 feet of film left in the camera, and we've got to get that shot today."
No pressure.
No pressure. And I remember back when I was a kid in McKeesport and on the playing baseball in the alley, and I wasn't really too good at baseball, at aiming baseball. So I said, "Yeah, I can do it." So the AD says, "Okay, Grover, Jam says he can do it." So they bring over a tray of tomatoes and he says, "Here, pick your poison." So I'm going through it and I'm feeling the weight of it. Yeah, okay. So I picked the one, and she's up on the roof of the thing, and they put on the music and they launched the camera, and I run around the corner praying to myself, and I take that thing and it explodes perfectly right on her chest, and she tumbles and falls off the roof. So I lucked out, and my two other brothers were over there negotiating up to the last second, saying that they would have been better at the toss than I would. But they got it with 24 feet of film.
And you did it. You did it in that one take.
One take.
Well, Grover, and then you've gone on to, with all the great work that you've done, you've continued to teach and to impart everything that you've learned to other generations. You've had some amazing teachers along the way, and you continue for the next generation. So God bless you for all of that. With all of the teachers that you've had along the way, some that we've mentioned, some that we haven't, who are some of the mentors along the way that you really would like to acknowledge that have made such a major impact on your life and your career?
Well, there were a lot of them. There was Herbert Ross, Tony Sharmanley, just a whole list of them. And, and they were amazing people. And I wish I could. I wish they were lined up in front of me now.
Yeah.
But I was very lucky. I was very lucky to be part of that time, and in movies and television, lots of television, lots of TV commercials, and Jerome Robbins Broadway, and meeting Anita Morris and falling in love with her, and
what an amazing talent, and
wasn't she?
Just an amazing talent, and how I was fortunate enough to see her in 9 on Broadway, and of course I saw Jerome Robbins Broadway as well. So.
Do you know where her number from 9, where it was put together?
Where?
In my kitchen. When Badge was 4 or 5, we would sit for dinner. He would eat and then run around the table. And then Anita and I would go, and we would experiment with all these positions on a wooden bench. And then she would take them to the theater the next day to Tommy Tune and show them to him what she had. And then he would pick them, but they originated in our kitchen. Isn't that amazing?
That kitchen was never the same again.
No.
I mean, and no one since then could match what she did on that stage with that number, with all due respect to everyone else that followed.
Yeah. And do you know how you know how we got together from the beginning?
Well, if you'd like to talk about that.
Well, you know, I was working at the Berkshire Theater Festival, and they were accepting submissions. And she said, Lynn Austin said, I've got a stack of 200 submissions for you to go through. You've got to get here to the office. So I go to the office, and I'm going through all these, and there's a picture and a resume. And then I have 3 piles, a yes pile, a no pile, and a maybe pile. And I come onto this picture, and it's a picture of a woman in a black leotard doing a back bend, and she's wearing a white plastic mask on her face. And I started to laugh. I said, who would submit a picture like that? And it is going over into the no pile, and my hand stops. I thought, wait a minute. I want to meet the person who would do that.
I have to ask, was the picture in black and white or color?
It was in black and white.
But it had to have, I mean, that gorgeous mane of red hair, even in black and white, must have popped right off the page.
Yes. Well, her energy came through the mask. That's the secret of mask. And I not only learned that from her, I learned it from Jerome Robbins at the American Theater Lab, which I'll tell. That's another whole story. But that's how I met Anita. She comes into the office a week later for an interview, and she's at the door. And I said, "Is this you? Are you the person wearing a white plastic mask?" And she's this stunning, gorgeous woman. And we got together and started talking, and we started talking about masks, and I started sharing how the American Theater Lab with Jerry Robbins, how we wore masks, and how Jerry brought in masks and for us to wear, and how he is believed that our energy could flow through the mask and out through it. And it was such a great introduction, you know.
I want to get back to your book for a moment. How long did it take you to write your book?
Well, we've been working on it for over 2 years now, and I've got some wonderful people to work with. And one of them is here with us today, Jerry.
Yeah, well, I want to give kudos to Jerry, because I mean, I have not physically met him, but you're very lucky to have him. I'm going to say that, because he is so attentive. The back and forth phone calls, he's so on top of things, and he cares so much. I would give anything to have an assistant like him.
So, that's Jerry.
Yeah, he is just absolutely on top of things. So, Jerry, thank you. I know he can hear me. So, thank you for all that you've done to make this happen.
Yes, yeah.
There he is.
Right, very kind of you.
It's true. I mean every word of it.
And then Jerry's colleague with this is Jennifer Thomas, she lives in California, and she's been amazing. She's the basic editor, and so we've been having an amazing time.
That's great. But I want to ask you, what is the one thing that you've learned the most about yourself from sitting down and writing this? Did you keep journals throughout your career?
No, I used to wake up. I would wake up in the middle of the night remembering events, you know, just like it's happening with you spontaneously. You know, some of it I remember, some of it I don't. And But when you hit on something and then you see the why behind it and you see the motive behind it, it's amazing. Well, you know.
Well, Grover, I mean, reading your book and the detail is just so incredible. And that story of, and I teared up with you telling it again, of your grandmother giving you that package, getting on the bus and opening it to see those photographs of your father, and the emotion that came over you seeing those photographs for the first time and feeling that love come across those photographs. And it's interesting that you, in two instances, you mention your father and those photographs and the love that came across those photographs that you felt for your father. And you also mention with Anita that energy and that love that came across. And I have to say that on every single page of your book, that's what we, the reader, get with your book.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. Well, just to add to that, there twice during this time with you, I've almost told you something, but I've withheld it. And one thing was about Anita. And when 9 started, things were happening with her. She had cancer, and I was reluctant to share that. And the same thing is with Jennifer Thomas. I just found out yesterday she has COVID. You know, it's like something remarkable will happen because of that. You know, it's like Anita's battle with cancer lasted 15 years. And at first, the prognosis was much shorter. So again, it drew us closer together, and it drew us closer together with Badge and taking care of our child and giving him the best that we had to offer, you know, and to watch what he's done with it, with the child that he and Emily have given birth to. It's glorious. It's just
wonderful. That's wonderful. What do you hope that readers will come away with after reading your book?
Well, I hope they might identify with some of the hope that's behind it. You know, that they might get a scrap, just a scrap. It's saying, you know, if this goes wrong, maybe I can survive it. Maybe I can get past this. You know, it's like, I don't know if you could stand to watch me dance. I'm 87. I would love to show you what I did with the West Side Story. I directed a version of it in Texas, and I put together my interpretation of it, but it's based on what Robbins gave me and the strengths that he gave me. But I'd love to show you that.
If Jerry can get that clip to me, we will close the show with that clip.
Oh, okay.
He can record that to me, and that'll be a great way to close the show. I can't believe this hour has actually flown. We are going to go a little, so we're at the end of the show, but don't go anywhere for a moment. I'm going to say my closing remarks. I'm going to let you say your closing remarks. We will have our closing credits, but I don't want you to go away because I want you to stick around after the closing credits because I do want to say goodbye before we end that. I want to thank everybody for being here today. When I do my live shows, I have a word of the day every day, and that's normally on the ticker below. But because we pre-taped this, I didn't have that today. But the word of the day on the day that I did this is fun. And I think about how we always have to have fun in our lives. And there's so much heaviness in the world right now. And as I was working on prepping for this show, I was going back and rereading the book. I got the book just last week, a preview of the book. And I was thinking of the fun that you had in your career, Grover, and the people that you were lucky enough to work with. But as I'm reading this, I was thinking how great that they got to work with you, because you brought so much to the table, and we are all so much better for it. I pulled a couple of photographs, and I'm just going to show a couple of these. Just look at those. It's in black and white, but you can see those red socks that are there. Just various photos here. There are the red socks right there.
Yeah, look at that face.
Yes. Just,
what is that?
Green Willow.
What is that? Oh, oh my goodness. That's Jerome Robbins Broadway. Yeah, that is Green Willow.
Jerome Robbins Broadway. And I love an early headshot of yours.
Yeah, that's the landlord.
The landlord.
Yeah, looks like the backstage door of the Winter Garden Theater with Skitter.
And I could be mistaken, but I think this is the show that got you your equity card. Oklahoma.
Interesting. I did do Oklahoma. I didn't last very long in it. I started to do it, but the girl that was playing opposite of me was old enough to be my mother. So Agnes didn't think it was a good duet for the boy to be dancing a romantic duet with his mother. But
thank you for all that you've done for all of us. I end my shows by telling everyone to go out and do something nice for somebody else without expecting anything in return. After today's show, please go to your Facebook friends list and reach out to the 9th name that pops up and reach out with a phone call. Not an email message, not a text message, not a private inbox message, a phone call. And let that person know what they mean to you. As my dear friend Sean Moniger always says, we're all in this together, but we're not in the same boat. And I always say, if you're going to go out in a boat, make sure you bring a skipper along. So, Grover, I'm going to leave the screen, and I'm going to give you the final word. And then it could be about something that we talked about today that you want to build upon, something that we didn't say that you wish we had, or just any final message you want to give everyone today. Don't worry about how to end the show. As soon as you say goodbye, the credits will roll. And again, when it's over, don't leave because I want to say another goodbye at the end. So it's all yours, Grover. Thank you.
Okay. It's a one sentence. Life is short and unpredictable. Eat dessert first. Ha!